Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video. I'm installing a BFI Stage 1 transmission mount on my 2018 MK7 GTI. So getting into the install, you can see here I'm taking off the air intake. I've got a Racingline R600 air intake, so it's a bit different than taking the stock intake off. Bit tough to get this up just because the little bushings that hold it on the Racingline are a lot stiffer than stock. Now that this is shimmied out of the way, I'm taking off the battery here. The entire battery tray has to come out to get access, and ideally the ECU should come out too. You'll see here I have a metal caged ECU, which will prove to be a pain when trying to install the transmission mount. So, battery's out. I'm taking off the battery tray. There's three 10mm. You can also use a Torx bit. I think it's a T25 or T30. And then there's also a 10mm, I think it's a nut at the back there. I have to take that off and kind of shimmy it off because there's a C-shaped hole. Also, when doing the transmission mount, you have to take off the under tray just because you can't quite get enough access to jack up. I was actually able to do the engine mount without taking the under tray off, just because of how I positioned the oil pan on a piece of wood. But here you can see now I've got my jack under the car. I've got the car on some wood blocks as well to raise it up so I can fit the jack underneath because it's lowered. And then I use a piece of wood in between the transmission and the jack to apply some light pressure. That way the transmission is supported when I remove the mount. So now here you'll see that I'm trying to gain access to the bolts that mount the transmission mount itself into the frame of the car. These bolts are hard to get to because I have the metal ECU cage. This came on some manual transmission cars apparently and a lot of the early model GTIs. But because I have that metal cage, I can't remove the ECU, which will allow me to move this plastic piece that contains a harness out of the way. So because I can't move it out of the way, I have to basically just try and shimmy it out of the way and gain the best access to the bolts that I possibly can. It's unfortunate, but I did not buy the plastic ECU cage in advance, and because my car has this ECU mounting mechanism and I don't want to drill out this riveted metal mount, I'm left with no other choice but to just try and gain the best access to the bolts that I can. So I lifted this up. I'm able to get a wrench in on this. And then on second bolt, although I advise taking it out after this one's out. So I have these two loosened. So all four of the bolts that go between the transmission mount and the frame are out, and I didn't have to take the ECU out. I just peeled this back, and I used some box wrenches, and I also used like some sockets that you can put a box wrench on to try and almost raise the point where I get the wrench on. So I was able to get these three out with box wrenches, and this one just came out with a socket. So now we're going to crack these bolts, which sucks because they're kind of new from when the trans got dropped for the new clutch. But it is what it is. But yeah, so I'm going to crack these. I really don't need such a big socket, or ratchet. You'll notice that the engine and transmission is drooping down here a bit. In between takes I did reposition the jack to support the transmission better. Now this mount is out. After struggling to get this out, this is great satisfaction. Now, finding out it's the rebuildable one, that's a slight bummer. Because I totally would have rebuilt it instead of buying the full mount. But I guess this is kind of rusty. Like, it looks like something's been leaking. I almost wonder if it's like battery acid or something, but here you go. So I fluid filmed all this where everything mates, because I did notice on some edges a little bit of surface rust developing. It's now about 3:30 in the morning when I was filming this, and you can see here I'm repositioning the mount to try and get it stable before I drive in the fasteners. And I struggled for a while until I realized it was because of how much the transmission was jacked up. So with all the fasteners hand threaded in and me as satisfied as I will be with the alignment, now I'm torquing down each of the fasteners. So again, with the limited access, it's really difficult to get a torque wrench on any of these. So I realize that this is not a perfect setup, but you can see here I'm basically doing like almost like a crow's foot with an upward extension. So a socket that fits into the box wrench, and then a socket to raise up the contact point. I'm using my torque wrench to torque down each and every one of these. And yes, I know it's not perfect, but it is better than nothing. And the torque spec for these is relatively low, so doing it by feel and also having the torque wrench in there to check isn't the worst thing in the world, even if it is imperfect. And that just says it all, right? It really sucked torquing those down and tightening those down without being able to remove the ECU. Okay, so that's a wrap on this install. Installing this on a vehicle with the metal ECU cage is hell. Really difficult to torque these down. I tried my best with my ghetto crow's foot solution, but it worked. And I feel pretty confident that it's at the right torque just based on how much force it took to remove the original bolts, and the fact that I know that these threads got slightly lubricated because I did put some undercoating on some of the seams, and I know that some of it definitely splashed up into the threads with how close I was spraying it, which is fine. I actually wanted that because it'll prevented galling when I was trying to get it in. All the new hardware, get that in. So yeah, that's the install. This is a hard job, so don't take it apart on a whim. It's definitely something you want to premeditate, unless you have the part number for the plastic ECU holder. That way you can just drill out these rivets and be done with this metal holder, because it's crazy how difficult it is with the holder in place. But I didn't have it on hand, and I already had the old mount out by the time I figured it out. So thank you for watching.